You're listening to a new episode of The Brave Technologist, and this one features Shafik Quoraishee, who is a senior mobile AI game developer at the New York Times. He works on popular games such as the New York Times Crosswords, Connections, Strands, and Wordle, and is deeply interested in the intersection of AI and accessibility. Previously, Shafik was a senior Android engineer for the National Basketball Association Business and a senior data engineer at Business Insider. In this episode, we discussed how they vet new game ideas for development at the New York Times and what they've learned about consumer behavior from the highly addictive and viral success of Wordle. How he balances innovation and experimentation with the responsibility of working for legacy brands, and his development philosophies and ways he builds games and applications to ensure user accessibility. And now for this week's episode of The Brave Technologist. All right, Shafik, welcome to The Brave Technologist. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this, don't often have people from the gaming side of things on. So just to kind of set the table a little bit, why don't you kind of give a little bit of color as to what work you do and what kind of led you into this world of gaming?
Okay, great. Yeah, and happy to do that. So currently at the New York Times, I'm working on our gaming platform, which our games are, I think, fairly well known now. So those include games like the Crossword, of course, which has been pre-digital. It's been a game of ours for quite a while. Wordle, which again everybody knows about, and has been one of our flagships that led to more of our games coming out in the future. So that includes Connections, Strands, which has been the most recent game that came out last year, and several other games as well. And more on the way soon. So I'm, again, specifically focused on the mobile platform for our games. So I'm building out and I've spent a lot of time building out the actual Android application that supports the games and supports interaction with the games and playback and scores and all the features of managing archives and other things that all of our players are used to who use our games on a regular basis. And yes, that's an interesting experience overall, because I've been in my history quite an avid game player, and so just being able to immerse my everyday work in the thing that makes me happy, which is gaming, and especially our casual games, which are accessible to, I think, a wide audience, feels really good, because I think there's a lot of appreciation that goes on for what we do and what we put out there.
It's such a cool combination too, when you think about the New York Times is such a staple in print publication, over such a long amount of time. But even people don't necessarily think about how much games have been involved in that too. Crosswords such a it's such a fixture, right? And now you're kind of having to incorporate mobile gaming into that. How is it having to kind of balance those there's almost I would imagine there's almost kind of a reflex not to try and impact things too much that are so tried and true, but still add new things that are interesting. You guys have done a really good job with Wordle and things like that, finding that way to connect that and then make it super viral. How do you balance all of that? How is that? Have you got freedom to kind of run with things or run ideas, or what's your mindset around this when you're thinking about ways to introduce games and get them out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so from my perspective, and since I'm the developer, I'm implementing the ideas that are usually produced by the game developers and the game designers specifically, and product and producers, etc. So, but being in the space, what's interesting is that just as a note, that the entire team pretty much has this ability to kind of contribute ideas from their different experiences and walks. So we obviously have a process where we evaluate whether a game makes sense. And as you know, we don't constantly release new games. We have, as you see, we have a game or two a year, and those games are usually very well received when they are released, and many people I've joined them, but we do go through a lot of vetting through many different ideas. We have like different pipelines and how we like look at different different versions of games, different features on their own as an individual thing outside of a particular game. We have like sessions and working groups that we bring ideas in and we like play around with them, and we do little adjustments to maybe known concepts or come up with completely novel concepts, and then try to then funnel those down through I would say a fairly rigorous multi-step process, and eventually being that the end goal is to produce something that we're fairly certain will be a hit. And we have a lot of evidence, and we go through a lot of research stages and testing and user testing and other processes to ensure that. Because it actually is very difficult to create a game that really can reach out to multiple people, and that's what we're kind of aiming for: the accessibility and the overall, the overall enjoyment of the widest group of people and our readers specifically, but outside of that even as possible. So there is a lot of room for ideation, but again, as I said, we are fairly exacting in how we decide certain things. And I'll also add to that is that our brand is very important as well. So the Times has a known brand where we try to make sure that the quality of our applications and products is true and reflects within our games itself. So we have quality and also simplicity as well, because again, as I mentioned already, our games are, as everyone knows, everyone can play the crossword. I think everyone can play Connections, and once you learn the rules, everyone can play Wordle.
Right.
And there's a skill level associated with it, of course, that as you can get better, but it is also a process and a technique to ensure that capability exists for a game, and that is very important to us. That the quality, all those factors, quality and accessibility and enjoyment, just organic enjoyment, is something that can be emergent from the products that we produce.
Yeah, it's so interesting, set of factors to balance. I mean, because there's almost like the game concept has to be really killer in order to be simple enough to still be challenging and be usable. Like crosswords are they're so fun and kind of like time consuming, but there's not overly thought out, right? Like there's just a balance, and I think we talk to gaming people and stuff. Sometimes it's focusing on a really small cohort of like hardcore gamers, and it's the concepts are very like out there, but like it's almost the inverse with you guys, where it's like, how do we make something that's like really minimal but fun, and like something people want to spend time on? Like how can you kind of capture that whole experience of like trying to open the newspaper to get to the thing and spend some. It's such a cool crossover, like that you don't really see that often, or I don't get the chance to talk to people there very often, so it's so cool to like talk about that. Now there's also kind of like this new area of like AI too in gaming. Like where's your head at with that? Like as a game developer, like are you using AI with what you're doing? Maybe not necessarily with the New York Times, but even more generally, right? Like what are you seeing like that's interesting when you throw AI into the mix of things?
Sure. And so a few things. So one thing I do want to note is that our games are the actual puzzles that are created, and the games themselves and the mechanics, those are all human made. And we actually pride ourselves on that, the human personality, like continuing to be the driving force in creating the games that we make.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because like again, that's kind of we want to reach people, and people reach people, and so that's
Right.
kind of the overarching philosophy there. And then we believe in the creativity of our editorial process and of our editors and the many people who are involved in actually producing the final output, which there are many people. And again, the editors are like specialized and skilled in that regard in puzzle craft, really. So that's the craft element there. So in terms of AI in general, so one thing I'll note that like, as part of the New York Times, we have like we have involvement in AI. There's information out there about like if you search for what we've done in that space. We do have a blog actually which talks about some of our AI projects that are interesting, and that actually are powering like our subscriptions business. And in some cases, we have like tools that we've put out there, like something called Brand Match and other technologies that are taking advantage of newer AI developments, which include like things in the generative landscape and whatnot. So yeah, that's actually a good place where you could find a lot of interesting information. I myself with AI and the New York Times have recently, an interesting thing I did actually last year was an experiment with getting handwriting recognition into our crosswords, and so that is on Neiman Lab.
Mm.
And if I can find that article, this was a experiment that was very it was fun to do because again I was able to use my background because I have a software engineering background, but I also have an AI background as well,
Oh, cool.
from a long time of working with, I guess, more traditional AI systems pre the generative phase of AI development currently. And in that work, I was for that particular implementation, I was able to kind of put those two together and do some like detection on the crosswords and build that layer in to like actually do that recognition, which is very interesting. And if you, it's out there as well if you want to read about it. But
Awesome.
yeah, and what I would say is that the uh, the actual the other things we do are like tooling. And so overall I would say that's kind of like what we do, what we think about and how we think about AI. And again, our content is editorial, and we pride ourselves on the people involved in building those things. And then at the same time, we recognize the capability of AI to enhance the productivity and the capabilities of people and through the uses of tools and building of advancements in tools.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's like an important thing too. It might sound like, you know, like common sense to people, but like in this space right now, there is kind of this tug of war going on of like, okay, like where do we keep the human element, or how does this enhance it? There's like fear and all sorts of things mixed around that, and it's smart, I think, to balance that and to have that human, like, especially to emphasize it, like especially the brand and everything like that. It kind of puts people's mind at ease. I mean, when you think about things like Wordle and also with against kind of this background of like short attention span and things like that, like what do you think it says about what do you think it says, you know, about things when you see games like Wordle being so successful, like you know, in this kind of context of like people having less attention span? I mean, people tend to play Wordle for a long time, I would imagine. Like you guys probably have the inside look on that, like I can't imagine, but you know, it's a it is. I mean, it was so viral when that game launched. Everybody was talking about it. It was really cool, like how you guys tied that together. But I mean, what do you how do you put those two together? Like when you look at something like Wordle and how people are consuming media these days.
Right. Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting, I guess, comparison, and that's an interesting thing to think about overall. So, the first thing that I think comes to my mind when I think about Wordle is that, in terms of like and in games like Wordle and like other elements of games that like have the same feel for Wordle that like that we've created, I think that mostly it's the enjoyment of the game and the challenge of the game. I think that sort of like kind of foments in people's minds and keeps bringing
Mm-hmm.
them back to the game, because again it's the elements of like simplicity, all those things that I've mentioned before: quality, simplicity, but also challenge factor, which as you had also alluded to, these are actually on their own they sound pretty straightforward, but they are actually very challenging to implement all in a single package.
Mm-hmm.
And so like all of those things together, I think, despite maybe the attention spans of people, reducing and whatnot, and like overarchingly like media consumption being very like, give me what I need now in many cases, and that I think what's interesting is there is the ability in Wordle to like, if you're really good, you can finish a puzzle really quickly, or you might spend a lot of time on it if you really want
Mm-hmm.
to get it without making a mistake or whatnot, or get it in as few chances as possible. I've seen people spend very a long time on one puzzle, and I myself have too. When I was like, yeah, I don't want to get this wrong, but I will say with that, because that element, that enjoyment element of the game and our other games is what I think keeps people thinking about it, and it's that organic element which, again, despite the sort of the media short attention span element, will consistently appeal to a person's desire to like really care about something. And I think that's one thing that, we sort of magically work with. And the games, hopefully, despite maybe even in the future when people's attention spans are almost gone when it comes to media, we can still, through our like process of vetting like what a good game is, what a very enjoyable game that speaks to our brand and speaks to quality and accessibility, we can still, I guess, fight that tide and still constantly produce experiences that keep people engaged for long periods of time and on a repetitive and a routine basis, and like that they have routines which they play and they come back to because they enjoy the game so much.
Yeah, like, and this can be like, I mean, your personal point of view. Did you when you were working on these things, like, did you anticipate it to go as viral as it did? I mean, it just like when people were like comparing scores, like I was just watching it like on X and elsewhere, and that was one of the thing too, where it seemed like people were talking about it in different social platforms, and it all felt pretty organic. Did you all like anticipate it to take off that way, or was it kind of like a interesting second order thing, or how much of that was like intentionally part of the design, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so like I've been here for about 2.5 years, so I kind of came after the Wordle migration happened, though like I've been involved in many understandings and seeing a number of things that have been happening with the games over that time period and the evolution into newer games. So I think, did we? I think it's a kind of like an experiential and learning process, from my understanding. So, we did have the understanding of what makes people enjoy a game from an intellectual perspective because of the crosswords, which is something that's, for a long time, crossword construction, crossword solving, we knew that engaged people. And now extending that capability is sort of something that, like, again, we're taking that understanding and then looking at newer products, and over time increasing our understanding of what really helps to increase what helps to superpower that element for newer games. So again,
Right.
it's like anything. We're like, yeah, like, oh, okay, well, we iteratively do something like this. Again, we test a lot, right? We internally test a lot. We have a lot of. We don't live in a siloed ecosystem here in terms of like not understanding the gaming landscape. That's something that the team has quite a bit of experience with, from years of experience in the Times and elsewhere, bringing tons of gaming experience onto the team. So from that's something that's learned from just, I guess, lifetimes of just being involved in game building, but also things that we learn about like virality and like how people kind of get invested in something. That's something that I mean, I myself am doing research on this in fact, and on the side as well, and I'm doing some presentations and things on this, like just overall, like how something is how something is fun. And it's also something that we see in a changing landscape, because again, we've dealt mostly with word games, and we're investing in, and we also have Sudoku and like other number games and other things like that. But this is, like, as I like to think about it, also an interestingly not fully explored space. So as we come out with a new game and we're like, oh, okay, wow, there's an appeal to connections which we might not have seen before, and it's just like unique and organic, and it very unique for the game that came out, and compared to the gaming landscape, we're like, wow, okay, that's something that we discovered, sort of like, and we try to build upon for like newer products. So I'd say, again, it's something that we've learned, something that we've built experience from, and something that is like kind of organically seeing the magic as it works.
That was one of those cool things where it was like, it felt like unlocking kind of a different dimension to things where
Hmm.
like even with virality, right, like you kind of like, okay, something can get amplified a bit, but it was one of those first times where I'm like, damn, people are like pinning their scores on their profiles. Like this is getting a whole other
Yeah.
level of gameplay here. Like it's really kind of like you guys caught something in a bottle there. And
Hmm.
again, I mean, I know I'm going to keep repeating myself here, but there's just something so cool about how minimal it is, but then how it catches because of that, right? Like, and I mean, when you mentioned too that you all are testing a lot, like how does that part work? Like, is there like a cohort of like subscribers or something that you can tap into to do early testing on, or is it something where you do like internal testing? I'm just kind of curious, like
Hmm.
how that part of it works.
Yeah, that's a good question. So some of it some of it I can speak to at a certain level
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
we do have processes that I think are unique and like um, very specific to us that are bespoke and that help us glean these insights. So those I'll
Hmm,
kind of
hmm.
speak at a level which I can talk to, but I would say yeah we do have like we do internal testing. We have testers from several different levels for different phases of analysis we do for our games. So we may have some more casual users that are like we'll see how they handle a particular like demo idea or a test idea, and then if they're more on the in like if they're more if the idea hasn't like really like caught internally yet, we'll focus like a team that's just like more like evaluating who has experience whether a game even has potential or not,
Hmm.
and those are like kind of like the first level testers, and then we'll have like if it determined to have a potential but needs tweaks, then we need to like build on top of that. Then sometimes those tweaks are done to a prototype, and then it goes to, if it's accepted again by the first level testers, it will go to another level that has either more experience or that is kind of like specifically geared towards looking at a particular feature and seeing how it feels. So there's a lot of there's a mix of targeted testing and a mix of like general testing, but
Hmm.
it sort of expands as the sort of internal understanding of the appeal of the game expands, and then so on and so forth until like then we start doing things like beta tests and we start putting it out there in different regions, and like we put it out there to the world to get that feedback. But by that point, the game has gone through several layers of like different kinds of testing, from different perspectives to get to that confidence level that okay, now we can like we can have the public see what's going on. And
That's awesome. And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
super
So
interesting, man. And yeah, I appreciate that. And you know, kind of, if you can talk about it, like, is there a recent project or a feature or something like that that really kind of pushed you creatively or technically that people might find interesting to hear about?
yeah, I think that so yeah, and if we're talking about projects like that I've done as features in the Times, correct?
It could be anything. I mean, like, really. I mean, like, I think we just kind of open up the minds of folks, right? Like, and I think
Mhm.
people might find it interesting, like, to hear what makes you tick a bit on this stuff, you know?
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm always a fan of like computational ideas and things that like involve like computational strategy, etc. So we have for a while had Wordlebot, which people can use to, I guess, validate how well they're doing overall with Wordle and compare
Hmm.
to a bot, the solver, which is on the actual application. So we ported that. And this is something that happened last year. Actually, I have a few thoughts about like other more recent things, but we ported WordleBot to our apps, and that was a huge hit. And that the whole like the bot concept and the bot idea, it like really stood out as something that we understood that people wanted to evaluate what they were doing. And to me, it's very interesting because a lot of people do actually. We have several articles that are actually in the public about this. Like people like to play against the
Hmm.
WordleBot and understand how how they're doing overall, and like against different metrics and against different like I guess criteria, and how many times or how many words, how close were they to solving very quickly versus how long it took to get past the point where they could actually solve effectively and still like continue on playing. So that really speaks to me because again I come from a background of like sort of AI development. And WordleBot, it's not like an AI or anything; it's a programmatic solver, but it's still using a process to compute metrics about a game and about a progression and evaluation as you're playing the game, which helps, I think, overall people get better at it. And so this metrics driven approach, are in general, these things appeal to me. I've worked in other scenarios and other situations where metrics were very important to like evaluate whether an idea is feasible or not. I've worked a lot with like A/B tests and like different kinds of like exposure and testing systems and data-driven analyses back when I was doing more analytic stuff, not here even prior to the times, on like, oh, well, is this even, if are these two patterns like moving together of data, or these two are these multiple like metrics related somehow? Are there correlations and things like that? Which sounds actually like an analyst's work, but I've worked with other analysts before. But also these kinds of ideas appeal to me, like finding anything I can develop that finds like meaning or something computationally or emergently in the things that I work on. I like, yeah. So I think that's mostly like with that particular feature. And then I'm involved in a lot of like AI presentations, like a lot of computational presentations. I've done one on last year also on a procedural generation of like environments, like cave systems and plant systems, and some of that I've posted about on my site, etc. That are just really interesting, like world building simulations. And there's several games out there which take advantage of like procedural generation and procedural content. And to me, even though now that these days that's being augmented with AI in itself, that just it's fascinating where that can go, because they're like examples of like infinite worlds being created in games that have like completely unique ecosystems of living creatures and things like that, and all that stuff. Again, I play around with a lot of that simulation stuff on the side, and that stuff is super fun. Yeah.
That's super cool. I mean, we've come a long way from SimCity, like back in the day,
Yeah.
it's awesome, I mean, and I think too, like I know you kind of hinted at it earlier about wondering if people are improving. Do you actually see people improve when they kind of augment with the bot and try to kind of learn? Have you guys seen any like trends in that, or is it something where it's still, you're kind of still looking at it? I'm just super curious. Like, I never even thought about it that way, that people would use a bot to try and learn. I know people do that with chess and stuff, but like, it's really interesting that people go to that deep on it.
Yeah, that's so I think overall, and I can speak to like even my own experience playing the game. Like I think there's a few elements to that. I do think that sort of organic awareness of how you're performing and have it measured actually it helps me improve, certainly. For example, like I would use, like, when I started playing Wordle, I would use like not really great like starters, right? And what I mean by not great starters are words that didn't take the larger distribution or more representative distribution of letters in our language into account. And that is actually like a counterproductive strategy to playing a good Wordle game. So you should start with like a word that represents more characters. And there's many people who've suggested words that are like good starters and whatnot, and it's kind of a fascinating thing. But yeah, and I think overall I started to get better at like selecting a word through multiple iterations and having an intuition of what could be the next word, just by looking at like the progression of like what a bot would select. Because again, it's hard to quantify exactly sometimes, like especially if you haven't like dug into it too much, but there is like a sort of thread between different letters and different lines of thinking of what could be the next letter in the word, if you still have to make a decision, if there's like a little bit of fuzziness. Sometimes you get lucky and you'll play along with the bot, and the bot will make a good choice. And the interesting thing is that there's the reward mechanism of the bot looking at your choices, I think, helps to reinforce sort of subconsciously maybe that you're on the right path as you're playing the game. So the next time you
Super
play
interesting.
Wordle, yeah, it's
Yeah.
and so again, a little bit is a little bit fuzzy and a little bit, but there's a lot of, I think, multiple dynamics at play, nuanced dynamics at play, um,
Well, and
in
it's
that
really
game.
interesting too. I mean, like, because I did a little bit of research too before the episode,
Mm-hmm,
and so you also worked for NBA in gaming, right? Like, and
mm-hmm,
so well, it's really interesting to me, like thinking about especially just what you were saying, and all that can go into picking words out. You go from like an environment like the NBA where there's all of these different dynamics, like
mm-hmm,
players, multiple players in a court, right? Like playing the game and all of that and those dynamics there. And then you bring it also over to something more simple on Wordle, right? Like where it's like very not one dimensional, but you know what I mean. Like it's very minimal compare in comparison. Like how was like what did you do at MBA? Like what type of work was that that you were doing over there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the work that I was doing there was different. It's actually more in line with work that I used to do when I used to work at Viacom
Hmm.
back in the day. So I used to work at Viacom, Nickelodeon, MTV, that the whole brand, the grouping of brands that's now like is Paramount, etc. But at that point, I was doing more like media related specific stuff. So I was actually building the application to actually do the streaming media content. So, and that was in the form of our different applications, our different mobile applications. So basically being able to select episodes, being able to like scroll through content and find recommendations for episodes based on, what you've used already, and having a whole account and authentication system. That's what I did over there. And then to the NBA, I continued that line of work, but the opportunity to work at the NBA was a great one, where I got exposure to a lot of like very like fast-paced mechanics, because the
Hmm.
development in the NBA when I was there was almost as fast-paced in many ways as the game itself.
I would
So
imagine, right? Yeah,
yeah,
because
yeah,
you got it. Aren't they work like seasonality, right, or
hmm
by year at least, right? If I
yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah. And I was involved in rebuilding one of our core application platform into what's called our next gen experience, and that was actually there's an article about when in the 2022 time period when that occurred, and it was like a large platform shift across multiple platforms where multiple people were working on, for example, like the Android application, the iOS, the Xbox, I guess the Roku application, several different platforms. We did a massive shift in the NBA to a more like robust version of our application. So I was involved in that, and I specifically worked on the Android um, TV application, the Fire TV for Amazon Fire TV, and the mobile app, and for the Android mobile app, and they all kind of shared a similar like process to for ultimately delivering the live streaming of games to users in an interesting and engaging way. So
Such an interesting juxtaposition like in time too, where you go like you're working at NBA and on these media platforms, right? As everybody's kind of switching to like cord cutting mobile, right? Like and almost mobile first in a lot of ways, right? Like
sure.
and then at the same time now you're like at the New York Times where you've got this like institution, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
very paper bound, but also kind of breaking into virality in a new way, like connecting
Mm-hmm.
with this new generation. It's really interesting stuff, man. Like it's super interesting, and I really appreciate you making the time to have the conversation. Is there anything what are you most excited about, like outside New York Times, just like kind of looking at AI and gaming and the space in general? Like, where are you kind of like spending time? Kind of like I know you mentioned environments and things like that. Like, what's really kind of something that you're looking to spend more kind of recreational time in on this front?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I, again, like as I mentioned, like simulations, environments, things like that have always been really interesting to me. Like creating like kind of like characters that kind of have a sort of personality in space, can like move around and interact. And I guess the thing is with AI is that, like, again, AI has been around for a while and has been involved in games for a while, in different years. I've done like actually presentations on this, on the evolution of AI through like when it was first implemented in games like in Pac-Man, and then like moved on to more advanced games to what we have now. It's quite fantastical in comparison. I think I'm looking forward to really where sort of the landscape and the advancement of gaming can go. And I think it's exponential because the recent advancements in AI, which some AI researchers had kind of known were always coming, because and maybe even if the public didn't know, I think overall, being in the academia of the space, I've been aware of kind of where the trajectory of AI was going over the last several years and the decade prior, that there was eventually going to lead to this like realm of like, you know, autonomous AI, robotics, and just artificial intelligence, and perhaps, you know, all kinds of like new interesting applications. So I want to kind of build experiences that haven't really been that still are within the ether, because prior to 2022, I believe, when like, you know, people were just speculating on this stuff, people had a conception of like what robotics and like AI could be and could lead to, but there are so many emergent applications that have just been like pulled out of like, you know, the development that have occurred recently, in terms of like, you know, how you can talk to AI, new applications of AI assistance, things that only 2 years ago we could never have imagined.
Yeah.
And I can imagine how many more are embedded within the technological, I guess, framework of reality that we haven't touched yet, especially when we start applying more of the LLM and like vision capabilities to like different spaces. Like when we start looking at imagery, when we start looking at 3D projections, hollow projections, other like more advanced, even 4D stuff in time, all these technologies can be so much more augmented, and newer applications be pulled out of these, and that includes in the gaming space. So excited for that.
It's super interesting. I mean, too, there's like also just this, like you mentioned in 2022, it's like now you've got this like level of both accessibility, and I feel like kind of this top-down mandate in the Fortune 1000 space to like put this everywhere. So like we're seeing it, like you start to see things that you didn't expect to see, like just from people having access and trying this stuff out. And yeah, like, and like you mentioned, going back to Pac-Man, like people aren't even really aware, I don't think, of like how far back like AI has kind of been in the gaming space. And I mean, they once they start to think about it, they think, oh yeah, you know, I was playing computer, I was doing these things, whatever. But yeah, it's really fascinating stuff, man. And I where can people tune in to your work, or learn more about what you're doing, or what you have to say out there? Like, feel free to plug away. We'll put stuff in the show notes, but love to give people an opportunity to learn more.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So I think my website is probably where I keep all my stuff consolidated. So www.shafikquoraishee.com, and that's kind of like my portal to like my YouTube channel, which is again after my name, and I guess my Twitter and LinkedIn profiles and all that contains lots of different things. I do write on Medium. I'm somewhat active, and I'm planning on becoming more active. So my Medium also has my name associated with it, Shafik Quoraishee. So if those are I think the best sources, and I will be putting out more interesting material over the next several, I guess, months there for people to like digest if they're interested. Yeah.
Fantastic, man. Well, Shafik, I really appreciate you again making the time. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I think the audience is going to like it a lot. And I'd love to have you back too if you ever have anything interesting that you're dropping to the market, or want to share any insights. Love to have you back too to revisit some of this stuff. It's been really cool discussion. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right, right on. All right, have a good one. Thanks for listening to the Brave Technologist podcast. To never miss an episode, make sure you hit follow in your podcast app. If you haven't already made the switch to the Brave browser, you can download it for free today at brave.com and start using Brave Search, which enables you to search the web privately. Brave also shields you from the ads, trackers, and other creepy stuff following you across the web.